Do you know that nearly 30 million Nigerians use firewood to cook as fuel during cooking, whether it is during parties or even individuals in their very homes? And do you also know that 77,000 Nigerians die annually from fire, that is open fire, from this cooking with wood? Well, there is a good news in Nigeria today, and that is that the federal government has developed a policy that would address some of the challenges with cooking with open fire. And this policy is tagged the National Clean Cooking Policy. Well, we caught up with the Executive Director of the International Center for Energy, Environment and Development, Ewah Eleri. He spoke to us on a number of issues, including shedding more light on the importance and benefit of the National Clean Cooking Policy and why it is important to sustain advocacy on it to ensure it is fully implemented. Hear him. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
All right. When people hear clean cooking, some people wonder what is it all about? Why should cooking be clean? So when we say clean cooking, what does that really mean?
Cooking is something that we do every day. It's an everyday necessity that we do essentially to be able to provide food for our families and food that is nutritious and healthy. But unfortunately, here in our country, the means for cooking has not received the kind of attention that it needs. Traditionally, in our old villages and towns, we all cook with wood, sometimes with charcoal. But we know that over time, that the smoke that comes from cooking with wood and charcoal are really very poisonous to human health. And it affects mostly women and children the most. And so the world over, all the governments have been trying to move all families from cooking from wood, charcoal, to cooking with cooking gas or LPG, or cooking with electricity, where there is no emission at all, and where you can cook very conveniently without smoke, And in a way, it's not only that smoke is so harmful to our health. It is also because that increasingly the issue of climate change has become very important. That some of those gases that come from wood and charcoal, and to some extent cooking gas, are some of those gases that are causing global warming and climate change. But the most important thing is that cooking should not kill. Cooking should not cause ill health to Nigerian families. And so clean cooking means that cooking energy from the stove or the fuel that are being used for cooking that is clean enough that it doesn't cause, it doesn't damage human health. That is something that other countries had that we didn't have in Nigeria. And thank goodness, Nigeria has come around to produce a policy.
So there's a policy now in Nigeria of clean cooking?
Yeah.
Okay. So how did we arrive at this policy, and what are the basic, items in this policy that would make it easy for Nigerians to cook clean?
Number one, stakeholders led by the federal government have all agreed that we are setting a target to ensure that all households in Nigeria have the access to these so-called clean cooking fuels and technologies. We've set a target that by the year 2030, that all families should have access to this, and we have even broken down these targets to say that by that milestone date, by 2030, that more than half of all the households that we have should be able to use cooking gas, 54%. And that by that year, 20% of all our households will be using electricity to cook, and so on and so forth. So it's not only universal access to all households in urban and rural areas, but the federal government and stakeholders have actually broken it down to ensure that we've segmented the use. We know this cannot happen overnight. We know that, for instance, getting cooking gas or LPG to rural areas, it's a challenging task for a lot of the rural areas we have in our country, just because the infrastructure is not there to be able to have gas plants in the rural areas. Two, that it costs a lot of money to actually transport it to rural areas. But even more important, that the economies of rural areas, the purchasing power, ability to afford refilling gases, is quite challenging in those rural areas. And therefore, that we don't have a situation where it is one size that will fit all families. So in this document, the government recognizes that for some parts of our country, some rural areas, it will take them longer time. And therefore, instead of pursuing only cooking gas, LPG, to rural areas and peri-urban areas, that there is a transition. There's a cooking energy transition where some families will still be cooking with wood, but using efficient methods of cooking with wood, the so-called efficient cook stoves, which is really locally made stoves that reduces the use of wood by up to 50% or more than 50%, and some of them eliminate smoke from the kitchen, so that these rural families that are poorer can now move from 3-stone fire, which is what we have been using in all times, to efficient stove technologies locally manufactured in those rural areas that reduces wood use and also reduces the cost that families, many families now buy those wood. Long are gone, in the period where you send your girl child and kids to the bush to collect wood. Thank goodness that practice is reducing in our country. So many families actually, especially the poor, spend a lot of money buying wood and charcoal. So if you have these cook stoves that are more efficient, then what it means is that you can reduce family expenditure on cooking fuel, reduce the harmful effects on family health, especially for women and children, and then make a small contribution to the fight against global warming.